The radio snaps to life, voice shredded by panic. Keep her down. Lion pen, Cat Haven. She's not moving. The lion's still in with her. We need help now. Gravel flies. Boots hammer dust. Keys rattle uselessly against steel. At the end of a sun-bleached corridor, chain link shudders with a low, vibrating roar. Inside the exercise pen, a 350-pound shape paces. Gold, muscle, heat. Cous Cous. Head low, tail ticking. Eyes locked on the crumpled figure on the concrete. Gate! Get the gate! A keeper slams a slide bolt. It jars, half catches, won't seat. Another fumbles the cutoff switch for the shifting doors. Metal answers with a dead, echoing clank. 911, what's your emergency? There's a keeper down. The lion's over her. We can't get in without... A second roar drowns the rest. It pulses through bone. Someone grabs a fire extinguisher. Someone else lifts a catch pole and hesitates. One step too close and there's no coming back. The air smells like dust, bleach, and cat. For a heartbeat, everything holds. Sunlight in the wire, flies in the heat, breath caught in 100 throats. Then the lion pivots toward the movement at the door. And every decision in the next 3 seconds will decide who lives. Long before her name would appear in headlines, Dianna Hanson was just a kid from Washington with a quiet but unshakable obsession: big cats. While others decorated their rooms with movie posters, hers were plastered with lions, tigers, cheetahs. She wasn't content to admire them from a distance. She wanted proximity. She wanted purpose. By her teens, Dianna's journals were filled with sketches of lions and notes about sanctuaries she dreamed of working in. She studied biology, volunteered at animal shelters, and told anyone who asked that her life's direction was already decided. She would save big cats, no matter the cost. Friends remembered her energy, her constant smile, her willingness to put others first. To them, she was fearless, but not reckless. She understood the risks, but believed every life was richer when spent protecting the creatures most people feared. When she landed a coveted internship at Cat Haven, a sanctuary tucked into the Sierra Nevada foothills, it felt like destiny. She told her parents it was the opportunity of a lifetime. She packed her things, drove south, and stepped into a world where the roars of lions and tigers weren't distant echoes from a zoo enclosure. They were the soundtrack of her every day. But that passion, that lifelong calling, would soon collide with one mistake, one gate, and one lion whose instincts couldn't be caged. Cat Haven wasn't a theme park. It wasn't a zoo. It was a sprawling sanctuary carved into the dry, golden hills of California's Sierra Nevada foothills, a place where lions, tigers, and leopards lived far from the crowds, under the watch of a handful of devoted caretakers. Founded in the 1990s, Cat Haven was meant to be a haven for endangered big cats, a refuge where animals bred in captivity could live out their lives in peace. Visitors came by appointment only, walking behind sturdy barriers, listening to the ground-shaking roars that rolled through the valleys. From a distance, it looked serene, picturesque even. But for those who worked inside, serenity was an illusion. Every day, behind the fences, raw power stalked on 4 legs. Cous Cous, the lion Dianna would one day face, was no circus cat. He was a 5-year-old, 350-pound African lion, his mane thick and golden, his presence magnetic. He was one of the sanctuary's stars, majestic, yet unpredictable. Staff respected him the way sailors respect the sea, beautiful, but capable of turning deadly in a single moment. Interns like Dianna weren't allowed direct contact. Their job was routine but vital: feeding, cleaning, maintaining enclosures, always separated from the animals by gates and steel. Safety protocols were drilled into them from day one. Never trust a latch, never turn your back, never, ever get complacent. But sanctuaries run on human hands, and humans make mistakes. All it takes is one slip, one oversight, for the fragile balance between devotion and danger to collapse. Dianna loved the mission of Cat Haven. She believed she had found her place, her tribe. Yet among the quiet foothills, she was walking every day in a space where compassion and carnage lived side by side, where the animals she adored could, at any second, remind her what they truly were. And on March 6, 2013, that reminder would come violently, with claws, with teeth, and with no second chances. The morning of March 6, 2013, broke like any other at Cat Haven. The air was cool, the foothills painted with that soft California dawn. For the small team of staff and interns, mornings meant order, feeding schedules, cleaning rotations, and the long, careful checklist that stood between them and disaster. Dianna Hanson woke early, slipping into her khaki work clothes and steel-toed boots, ready for another day in the rhythm she was beginning to master. She wasn't the type to cut corners. Friends said she carried her work with quiet pride, even reverence. To her, this wasn't just cleaning cages. This was service to the animals she loved. The keepers moved methodically, never forgetting the weight of the eyes watching them from behind bars and fences. A leopard pacing, its tail twitching like a metronome. A tiger's low rumble vibrating through the steel. And then there was Cous Cous, the lion whose deep, echoing roar could be felt in the chest before it was heard in the ears. Routine was supposed to be the shield. The rules, always close the gate, always double-check the locks, were designed to keep human error from becoming fatal. But even the most seasoned handlers will admit, routine breeds comfort. And comfort, in a place like Cat Haven, is as dangerous as the animals themselves. That morning, Dianna was assigned to clean the exercise enclosure connected to Cous Cous's pen. The process was simple on paper. Shift the lion into his holding pen, secure the gate, then enter the larger run to rake debris and refresh the space. She had done this before. The team had done this hundreds of times. But sanctuaries aren't like the wild, and they aren't like zoos. They are in-between places, where humans and predators live in uneasy partnership. One loose latch, one forgotten chain, one moment of distraction. That's all it takes. And as the sun rose higher over the sanctuary, that morning's routine, what should have been ordinary, uneventful, was already beginning to unravel. The kind of unraveling no checklist could stop, no training could undo. Dianna walked toward the enclosure with tools in hand. Cous Cous, restless, waited on the other side of the bars. What neither of them knew was that the invisible line between safety and slaughter was already about to snap. It didn't look like failure. It sounded like routine. Metal slid. A bolt clacked. The guillotine door thudded down between Cous Cous and the exercise run. But the difference between safe and fatal wasn't a door. It was millimeters. The slide bolt hadn't seated flush. The hasp kissed the padlock shank but never swallowed it. The secondary clip, the tiny throwaway insurance, hung loose against chain link. An afterthought shining in the sun. From 5 feet away, it looked right. From 5 inches, it wasn't. Dianna stepped through the keeper gate, set her rake against the fence, and sank to a knee. Dust rose in lazy spirals. The morning smelled of hay and bleach. Behind the guillotine, the lion's breath fogged the shadowed air, slow and steady. A good shift should have made him a rumor. Instead, he was a calculation. Big cats test the world with quiet questions. A nose at the seam, a whisker brushing metal. Pressure, then stillness. Listen. Try again. Cous Cous leaned. Steel flexed. The unseated bolt lifted half a tooth. Nothing dramatic, just a nudge that turned barrier into lever. He pressed his shoulder into the panel, muscles coiling under gold. The door rose a finger's width, then 2. The clip that should have prevented that, still dangling, useless, bright as a warning no one read. At Diana's boot, a tuft of grass snagged her laces. She bent to free it, wrist turning, attention narrowed to a knot that wasn't there a second ago. Behind her, the panel sighed. Metal on metal, the softest tisk, and a sliver of dark opened at the floor. Predators measure opportunity, as distance divided by speed. The guillotine lifted just enough for a paw to clear. Pads slid under. Claws kissed concrete and hooked. One smooth draw. And the door rose farther. Weight transferred from skull to shoulder to spine. The gap became a hand's width, then a forearm's. On the clipboard, the box still read secured. In reality, the system was already past tense. Diana's radio chirped. She answered without turning. Copy. 2 minutes. Cous Cous exhaled, low and patient, and did the simplest thing a lion can do when the world offers him a door. He took it. The sound was so small it barely registered, like a hinge groaning, a hinge that should never have moved. Dianna didn't hear it. She was crouched low, rake sweeping in slow arcs, gathering straw into a neat pile. The rhythm was meditative, almost calming. This was the part of keeping she loved, the quiet, the closeness, the sense of doing something that mattered. But 3 feet behind her, something shifted in the air. Cous Cous didn't burst through like in a movie. He didn't roar, he slipped, like water through a crack. The guillotine door shivered once, rose the width of a palm, and the lion slid forward, his body pouring under with deceptive grace. 1 second, he was contained. The next, he was in the pen with her. A silence stretched, unnatural, too heavy. Then came the sound. Pads on dirt, claws faintly clicking stone, breath deeper now, faster. Dianna stiffened. She knew what that sound meant. Every keeper knows. She turned just as shadow detached itself from shadow. The lion's eyes fixed on her, amber, wide, locked. Predators don't hesitate once the balance shifts. The barrier was gone. The rules were rewritten. And in that instant, she was no longer his caretaker. She was prey. She rose halfway, rake still in hand, not a weapon but a stick of straw against iron. "Hey, hey." The words were steady, a trainer's instinct. Calm the animal, use voice, posture, presence. But presence means nothing when 350 pounds of predator have already made their decision. Cous Cous lowered his head, haunches bunching, tail flicking once, an executioner's signal. His body moved before thought, before breath, before Dianna could take another step. He lunged. The world collapsed into one impossible second. The rake clattering against metal, Diana's gasp cut short, and the thundering weight of a lion colliding with human flesh. Concrete shuddered, air split with the crack of impact, and the sanctuary, silent only a heartbeat ago, echoed with the sound no keeper ever forgets. The guttural, bone-deep snarl of a lion that has crossed the threshold from caged animal to hunter unleashed. Dianna was inside his world now, and there was no way back out. Impact first, sound later. Cous Cous hit like falling stone, all weight and velocity. The rake snapped against the mesh with a useless clatter. Dianna staggered half a step, hands up, trying to make herself tall, trainer's reflex, when the lion's forelimbs scythed across her collar line. A lion's paw is not a hand. It's a blunted mace with knives. The blow didn't slice, it moved her. Head wrenched, shoulders torqued, spine forced past the range the human neck can bear. There was a compact, awful crack, the kind that doesn't echo because the body absorbs it. Her legs failed at once. Cous Cous flowed through the opening he'd made, chest over her chest, claws set for purchase, the second paw pinning her hip. No roar, just breath, hot, rhythmic, workmanlike, as he adjusted, testing for motion that didn't return. Predators are economy creatures. When the neck goes, the fight ends. He knew it, because evolution taught him. Disable first, dominate second. His jaw lowered, whiskers splayed. Canines brushed fabric, then skin. A possessive hold rather than a frenzied tear. This was not rage, it was process. Diana's hands found the only leverage available, the lion's ruff. Fingers sank into the dense mane, not to fight, but to feel, to anchor to something in a world that had dropped away beneath her. Air came thin and high. Sound tunneled to the thud of his heart against her sternum, and the scrape of claw on concrete as he settled, certain. Outside the chain link, motion bled into shouts, boots, a slammed latch, the tinny, too calm voice on a radio asking for confirmation no one could give. A keeper hit the mesh with a shovel. The pen rang like a struck bell. Cous Cous flicked an ear and didn't lift his head. Seconds lengthened. Predation compresses time for the predator and dilates it for everyone else. Diana's vision feathered at the edges. She tried to roll a shoulder and found it distant, unresponsive. She understood, keepers always do, that once a lion has you down and quiet, the window is gone. He shifted again, a final proprietary regrip at the base of the neck. Textbook control. The pen smelled of dust, sun-warmed iron, and cat. When he exhaled, it rumbled through her bones. The fight was over. The crisis for everyone outside the fence had only just begun. Panic doesn't rise in a neat arc. It detonates. The first staff member to round the corner froze, breath dammed in her throat as she registered the impossible. Dianna was down, and the lion was on her. Cous Cous wasn't thrashing, wasn't wild. He was composed, hunched low over his prize like molten muscle folded into shadow. His tail lashed in a measured rhythm, the signal every keeper dreads. Possession. "Gate shut! Lock it down!" The command cracked through radios, through lungs, through shaking hands. Steel on steel as the outer perimeter slammed. The sanctuary's golden rule, never let panic loosen protocol, was already buckling under the sight in front of them. Inside, Cous Cous shifted his stance, one paw curling around Diana's torso as if bracing against the commotion. His mane caught the light, gorgeous, dreadful, haloed, and his jaw flexed just enough for teeth to ghost against skin. The keepers knew the truth. Any rash move could turn possession into frenzy. One keeper raised a tranquilizer rifle, hands trembling, safety still on. "Clear the shot! Get her out!" The words collapsed. There was no out. The cat's body covered hers entirely. Even the barrel's slight movement pulled Cous Cous's gaze toward the fence, eyes a burnished gold that froze every muscle watching. Shouts collided with silence. Radios stammered half-finished codes. A phone call to emergency services blurred into an awful chorus. "We need paramedics, we need deputies, keep her down, lion attack, secure the perimeter, no public entry." But the guests were already arriving. Families, children, guided by routine into the morning sun, only to meet a wall of keepers herding them back with arms outstretched, voices thin but firm. "Sanctuary closed. Please step away." Some obeyed without understanding. Others lifted cameras. A few caught fragments of the scene through the mesh before being pushed away. A lion's shoulders rising, falling, something pale beneath him. Every second lost was another heartbeat further from hope. The sanctuary, usually a haven, now felt like a trap. Metal, bars, protocols all turned against the very people they were meant to protect. Cous Cous stayed unmoving, heavy, his breath steaming against Diana's skin. The keepers knew they were standing on the knife's edge between control and chaos, and the silence between each radio call was more terrifying than the noise. "Do you want me to push Chapter 9 toward the desperate attempt to intervene? Tranks, tools, chaos? Or hold the tension a little longer with the chilling stillness before the storm breaks?" The sanctuary had protocols for everything. Escaped cats, injured keepers, tranquilization drills. But no sheet of paper, no classroom scenario could mirror this. A keeper pinned beneath 350 pounds of apex predator, alive or dead uncertain. The trank team moved into position, hearts hammering in unison. The dart rifle snapped against a shoulder, sights narrowing on the rise of the lion's flank. But hesitation knifed through the air. At this range, any dart could take seconds, agonizing, endless seconds, to work. And if it pricked him wrong, it could make Cous Cous explode into a frenzy. "Take it!" one voice barked. "We'll lose her!" Another whispered, "She's already gone." The rifle cracked. The dart hit. Cous Cous let out a guttural roar that thundered across the enclosures, rattling bones and caging alike. He surged, muscles alive with fire, and for one horrifying moment the keepers thought he would drag Diana deeper into the enclosure, vanishing her body into shadow. Keepers grabbed anything at hand. Metal poles, fire extinguishers, clanging the bars. A brutal orchestra of desperation meant to drive him back. But Cous Cous didn't scatter like a frightened cat. He spun, lips peeled into a snarl, tail lashing a metronome of rage. His paws stayed planted on Diana, as if he were claiming her not just from them, but from the world itself. Outside the gates, families screamed as the reality finally leaked into the open. A lion had killed a keeper. Parents dragged children back, covering their eyes, shielding them from the sound of alarms, from the sight of men and women pounding metal in futility. Seconds bled into minutes. The tranquilizer began to crawl through Cous Cous's veins. His roars staggered, his stance shifted, but not before his teeth closed once more, final and unforgiving. By the time his body sagged into a heavy stupor, Diana was still beneath him, silent, unmoving. The keepers rushed in with poles and stretchers, pulling her from under the weight of the sleeping giant. For a brief, unbearable heartbeat, they waited for a pulse. There was none. The desperate gambit had come too late. The sanctuary had fallen into an unnatural stillness. Couscous lay sedated, a giant reduced to sleep. Yet in that silence, the horror was deafening. Then came the sirens, wailing in the distance, growing louder, tearing through the rural hills of California. Fire trucks, ambulances, sheriff's cruisers, descending on a place usually filled with laughter, awe, and the low rumble of lions. Now it was a crime scene, a battlefield, a tomb. First responders sprinted through the gates, eyes darting from the tranquilized lion to the stretcher being pulled from the dirt. The look on the medics' faces said it all before words were spoken. Dianna was gone. The sheer trauma of her wounds, the instant snap of her neck under Cous Cous's swipe. She never stood a chance. And yet, protocol demanded hope. Paramedics dropped to their knees, performing compressions, checking pupils, calling out times and vitals that were already lost. Her colleagues stood frozen, some sobbing openly, others locked in shock. These were men and women who dedicated their lives to animals. But now they stared at the same hands that had ended their friend's life. Sheriff's deputies cordoned off the pen, radios crackling with reports no one wanted to hear. "Keep her down. Confirmed fatal." The words hung heavy in the night air, sinking into everyone's chest like stones. Meanwhile, beyond the sirens, cars lined the road. Reporters were already arriving, lenses glinting, hungry for the first shots of flashing lights against chain-link fences. The story was out. The intern killed by her lion. Inside, though, it wasn't a headline. It was raw grief. Colleagues whispering her name, clutching each other, replaying the moments that led to the unthinkable. And as the paramedics finally stopped their efforts, draping a sheet across Dianna's body, a suffocating truth set in. The sanctuary, the very place she thought safest, had betrayed her. By dawn, the story had already escaped the sanctuary walls. Helicopters thundered overhead, news vans lined the dusty road, and microphones were shoved at anyone willing or unwilling to speak. The words were chilling in their simplicity. Young woman killed by lion at Cat Haven. Dianna Hanson's name was everywhere before her family had even arrived to claim her. Reporters demanded answers. How could a sanctuary, an accredited refuge for endangered species, allow a 350-pound predator to get close enough to kill? The narrative split in two. Some painted Dianna as a naive intern who underestimated the danger. Others saw her as a young hero, dying for her love of wildlife. But what unified the coverage was outrage. The words preventable, failure, and system breakdown blared across headlines. In press conferences, sanctuary spokespeople stood pale and shaking, struggling to defend their safety record. They stressed that Dianna had been experienced, that this was a freak accident, not a reflection of negligence. But to the public, one truth was inescapable. A young woman had walked into a lion's pen and never walked out. Animal rights activists seized the moment. Some argued big cats should never be confined at all. Zoos, circuses, sanctuaries, it didn't matter. Others insisted sanctuaries must exist, but called for stricter oversight, more regulations, and harsher consequences for mistakes. Then came the darker voices. Radio hosts and online commenters asking blunt, cruel questions. What did she expect, working with lions? Isn't this natural selection? The kind of rhetoric that stripped her of humanity and turned her death into fodder for debates about wildness, captivity, and human arrogance. Meanwhile, her family, just hours from hearing the news in Seattle, watched their daughter's life reduced to sound bites. They saw her dreams of conservation buried beneath sensational headlines. They heard strangers speak her name without ever knowing the woman behind it. And through it all, a single image lingered in every broadcast. A lone ambulance pulling away from Cat Haven, its lights flashing against the dark silhouette of the hills. A ride not of rescue, but of recovery. In the weeks that followed, the dust at Cat Haven settled, but the ripples of Dianna Hanson's death spread outward like shockwaves. Her family buried her in Seattle, laying to rest not just a daughter and a sister, but a young woman whose life had burned brightly with passion and purpose. Friends remembered her laughter, her endless curiosity, the way she spoke of lions as though they were both majestic and fragile. She hadn't been afraid of their power. She had respected it. At the sanctuary, staff walked past Couscous's empty enclosure in silence. The lion who had ended Dianna's life was gone, euthanized by deputies on the day of the attack. His absence was a wound of its own. He had not been a monster, not a villain, but simply what he was, a predator. And that truth made the tragedy even harder to bear. Investigations concluded what her family already knew. One lapse, one unsecured gate, had been enough to erase a life. Authorities ruled it an accident. No charges were filed. But the whispers didn't fade. Should sanctuaries rely on interns for such dangerous work? Should more barriers, more protocols, more oversight have been in place? Her parents demanded change, not vengeance. They wanted the industry to learn from Dianna's death, to rewrite safety manuals, to double-check locks, to ensure no one else would ever face what she had. They carried her passion forward, speaking of her not as a victim, but as a young woman who died doing what she loved. And yet, beneath every speech, every interview, every official ruling, one image haunted those who knew the truth. Dianna's final moments, trapped in a pen with a lion she adored, her life cut short before it had even begun. Her story is now a warning carved in memory. Respect the wild, never underestimate its power, and never forget the human cost when mistakes meet predators. Dianna Hanson's death is more than a tragedy. It is a reminder. We walk among predators believing we've built walls strong enough to protect us. But sometimes a single mistake is all it takes to let the wild slip through. She wanted to dedicate her life to saving lions. Instead, her own life was claimed by one. And so the question lingers. When we choose to step into the world of the untamed, are we protecting them or are we gambling with ourselves?